Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I know you have been tuning in the past and heard Gary Romano and I. Gary is from Civitas Strategies, talking about the Paycheck Protection Program and other programs that benefit nonprofits and small businesses. Gary and I wanted to hop on video this afternoon and talk to you specifically about the recently passed stimulus legislation, as well as some other programs that have the potential to benefit nonprofits and other small businesses. There's been a lot of conversation, rightfully so, about the PPP and the next round of PPP, but there are also significant updates to other programs that can benefit your organization. What we wanted to do is bring it under one umbrella and share 6 specific questions to run through with you to give you a holistic picture of the types of benefits that may be available for your nonprofit and small business. Without further ado, I want to welcome Gary Romano of Civitas Strategies.
Always a pleasure to be chatting, especially about ways to help the organizations we care about. Greg and I, over the past couple of weeks, have gone through over 1,500 pages of the original stimulus that came out, as well as this Wednesday evening, late in the evening, there was 180 pages of guidance that came in from the SBA. Additionally, as well as even up till today, even just a few minutes before we started this, we got some additional guidance. And so we know that this is going to be opening up um, CDFIs, the Paycheck Protection Program, starting Monday, and then
That's
Wednesday,
January 11th. Yep.
yeah, January 11th. So this is happening quickly, and then it's going to open up to other banks as well. um, that'll be happening, and some of these other things we're going to be talking about should have guidance hitting over the next couple of weeks. So let's talk about these 6 questions that Greg mentioned that can take you through not only the PPP but all of these other opportunities. Question 1 is, do you have a PPP? We know a lot of you were hesitant. We think about those heady days back in April 2020. We didn't know, what the forgiveness was going to be, et cetera. There was a lot of really good hesitations. A lot of nonprofit boards didn't want to take the risk. If you haven't, first and foremost, go for that first draw PPP. It's under the old rules. As long as you fit the criteria as a small business, you can do it. The ceiling has come down to $2 million, but I know for a lot of you, that's going to be more than enough. Second question to ask yourself, do a quarter to quarter analysis. Now, let me tell you how to do that before you go, right? So we're looking at quarters. So quarters defined in the typical way we do it. So January, February, March, April, May, June, right? And you're comparing your 2019 to 2020 gross revenue, right? So it's for your nonprofits, it's everything you took in, fundraising, et cetera, not the PPP. If you had one of those first draw PPPs, put that aside. But right now it includes all your grants, all your fundraising, fee for service. And what you want to do is you want to look at every quarter and say, what was the percent difference? Did you drop from 2019 to 2020? If that drop is greater than 25%, you can be eligible for a second draw PPP. And since this question comes up, well, what if I didn't have that first draw yet? Well, once you expend the first draw, if you expend that first draw in like 8 or 9 weeks, you can still apply for a second one. So, there is that opportunity as long as you meet this criteria.
Gary, let me ask you two
Yeah,
follow-up
yeah,
questions on
yeah.
that. The first being the criteria that you just mentioned is you have to have expended your first draw PPP. You don't
Yeah.
have to have applied for or secured forgiveness. Is that correct?
Absolutely critical point. Absolutely, because I know so many people have not gotten forgiveness. You don't need forgiveness yet. Just as long as you've expended those dollars, and you should have by now anyway, right? Then you can absolutely apply.
Second question is for my nonprofit friends out there that are on a different fiscal year than calendar year. What we're talking about is still a calendar year, quarter over quarter, 2020 versus 2019. So even if my fiscal year is July 1 to June 30, I'm still looking at this from a calendar year perspective. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And without going into too much, by the way, we should also note the PPP expanded some of the non-personnel things you can spend on. So that 40% that we've talked about in the past that you could spend on things that are not personnel is now beyond Rent, utilities, and mortgage interest include a number of things that are going to cost you money, like personal protective equipment and other things. So there's a lot of opportunity here to use this money effectively.
So first two questions are talking to me about if I haven't taken a first draw PPP yet, I can still do that and I can still expend those funds. Second question is asking me, I need to take a look at my revenue numbers. I need to look at 2020 versus 2019. And if I can show a greater than 25% drop from 2020 to 2019 to 2020, I may be eligible for part two, phase two of the PPP. Question three, what's it going to take us to then?
So there's also been some real changes. So if we had talked in December,
Yeah.
I would have said employee retention tax credit not applicable, right? Because the government had set it up so that either you had a PPP or the ERTC, one or the other, not both. And when you looked at it dollar for dollar, the without going too much into the details, the PPP got you more money. And so when you and I were talking to people all last year, we were saying, go for the PPP, go for the PPP. One of the changes in the law that was signed on December 27th is that you can now apply for the ERTC even if you got a PPP retroactively. It sounds weird, but it is absolutely correct. So you can look back into 2020 and say, did I meet the old ERTC criteria? Did I have a quarter to quarter drop? Again, as Greg said, right? We're not talking fiscal year, we're talking calendar quarters of 50% or more. If you did in that quarter, it can be eligible starting March 12th. So if you have quarter one, it's only March 12th through the 31st. But the way this credit works, this is a refundable tax credit, which is a fancy way of saying it comes off your Social Security taxes as an employer, and anything above what you've paid, you can get back as a check. So think of it more like a grant. Get the refundable tax credit out of your mind. It's going to confuse you. And if you're a nonprofit, yes, you don't have a corporate tax, but you do pay personal taxes, or I'm sorry, staff taxes, right, on your personnel. So this does apply to you. And this is one where, again, it opens it up. You can't double count the money. So as we talk about these things, you can't say, oh, I was paying Greg under the ERTC and PPP at once. No. But for some of those quarters, this could be some new revenue for you. And again, you fill out a form 7200. We can go through that in detail if you need us to. And that could get you a check off of it. The other change that they made was they extended the ERTC into 2021. And, that's the next question is if you had a quarter to quarter drop of greater 20% or greater in the last quarter of 2020, and I know you're going to say, but you're talking about 2021, you're allowed to then trigger the first quarter 2021. And the advantage of this is twofold. One is starting in 2021, you can draw more money. So the way the employee tax credit worked in 2020 was up to the first $10,000 of eligible salary that you paid out, you could get half of it for the whole year, right? So up to $5,000 an employee. That's a good amount of money. 2021, it's up to $7,000 a quarter. So if you have some revenue problems in those first two quarters of 2021, you could easily end up with $14,000 an employee. And that leads us to the next question, which is about the targeted EIDL. Now, I want to make it clear, we're talking about the EIDL advance here. The loan is not forgivable. The loan is debt. But as some of you remember, there was that EIDL advance. It's the grant that you get that was $1,000 to $10,000. A lot of people got very frustrated with it up front because there were all these rules around it. And people said, well, I only got 1,000 or I didn't get anything. I didn't know why. It comes off my PPP forgiveness. That's all changed. It doesn't affect your PPP forgiveness. And if you live in a high poverty community, that's not Greg and my words, that's the language of the government. You have to look at your census tract. And if it's 30% or more families in poverty, then you can apply for the targeted EIDL advance. So that is $10,000 because you're in those communities and you've been affected by coronavirus, by the impacts on the economy, not you individually. Last question. Did your team need time off? And the team could be you, for those of you who are the single person running your nonprofit, um, need time off for COVID or remote school. If that's the case, you want to take a look at the Families First Coronavirus Act leave. So many of you remember this leave starting in April 1 provided the opportunity for organizations with 500 employees or less to give 2 weeks of paid leave up to $511. The government would give you back through refundable tax credit. And that was for if you had coronavirus, if you had to take care of a family member, or if you had to quarantine because of coronavirus. Additionally, it provided 2/3 of your pay up to $200 a day for remote school or if your school was closed. So this can be intermittent. So for those of you like us, where your kids are only in school 2 days a week, if you're home those other 3 days, you could be eligible for this. Now, in 2020, this was actually part of the law, right? You had to be able to offer this. In the first quarter of 2021, first quarter only, you can still get the leave if you didn't expend it in 2020. It's not required, right? So if Greg comes to me and says, I need time off for remote school, I don't have to give it to him. But if I voluntarily give it to him, we can go after that tax credit, that refundable tax credit. And when I say if it hasn't been expended, as I said, they were like a 2-week limit for COVID related leave, right? So if I, let's say, took 1 week, let's say way back in August because I was sick or caring for a family member, then I could take 1 week additionally in the first quarter of 2021. Again, refundable tax credits, a Form 7200, you fill it out, the money comes back to you in cash. So if these 6 questions, you could really home in on all the opportunities that are out there.
I think that's the benefit of these 6 questions, Gary. So for those who don't know, Gary and I have worked with literally hundreds of nonprofits and small businesses all across the country during this time of stimulus and during the COVID pandemic. And one of the things we've both noted and both been really disappointed by is the number of small businesses and particularly nonprofits that have been left behind, that either missed out on the PPP or have missed out on some of these other programs that can really provide a significant boost to your mission, a significant boost to your bottom line that allows you to continue to make a great impact on your community. And so we wanted to come up with what are the 6 questions, because we know this is overwhelming, right? We know that a lot of these programs are overwhelming. How can we distill that down? How can we help provide a framework to evaluate some of these different programs? Gary, when we think about moving forward, you've given us the framework. You've given us some questions to think through, and helping us to think through it more broadly, right? Helping us to think through it as not just PPP, but also EIDL advance, employee retention tax credit, Families First Act. How do really putting an umbrella around this to help us think through. If individuals have more questions, or if they have questions specific to their nonprofit or small business, we don't want them left out in the cold. How can they get a hold of us?
Email us, right? It's that simple. You'll see right up here, Greg's email, right? Right up here on the slide, my own email. For those of you who might be listening, it's Gregory, GREGORY at NIELSENCONSULTS.com, Gregory at NielsenConsultants.com, or Gary, GARY at Civstrat, CIV as in Victor, STRAT.com.
I want to thank you again, Gary, for joining me for this video. I think that we've given folks a lot of information, a lot of food for thought. And again, our goal in doing this is to provide information. It's to get the information in the hands of those who need it most. So do encourage you to reach out to Gary, reach out to myself if you have additional questions or we can be helpful in any other way. As always, want everyone to stay safe and stay well, and we'll keep the updates coming. Gary, this is, as you mentioned, updates are dropping literally daily, sometimes at midnight. So, our commitment, and I'm speaking for Gary here, is to keep you updated and keep you informed. And so as guidance changes, as opportunities become available, we'll continue to share these videos as long long as there is interest in it and as long as we're able to provide solid guidance for you. So thank you, and stay safe and stay well.
Take care.